Telecommunications imports cost Nigeria $10.8 billion over the last 5 years. There's the breakdown. In its national policy for the promotion of indigenous content in the Nigerian telecommunications sector, the Nigerian Communications Commission said the annual outflow of forex for the sector amounted to about $2.1 billion a year. The stats were based on the average annual reports of a sample of industry players in the telecommunications space over a 5-year period. Joining us to discuss more, Ayodeji Ebo, Head of Retail Investment at Chapel Hill Denham. Good morning to you, Ayodeji. Thank you so much for joining us. So what do you make of that FX import bill for telco equipment and services?
Okay, I think my view about it is that when you look at the breakdown or you look at the sector as a whole, there are a lot of items that are being used that we can't produce in the country. So that's a major factor that we need to consider. Yes, outflow is being significant, average of about $2 billion per annum. And when you do a breakdown of the analysis as you highlighted, you would see that management services accounts for the major part of it, which is even higher than the capex. So the focus is for us to now look at what are those things or services that we can offer. Is it that Nigerians, we really don't have much expertise for us to provide a bit of support? In terms of capital expenditure, there's little or nothing we can do because we currently don't produce a lot of those infrastructure required in Nigeria. So I believe that there's really no concern there. It's for us to, because it's peculiar to the sector where they operate. They use a lot of equipment and they need to import those equipment. And that is why most times if there's any FX challenges, it will really impact. If there's any depreciation or a devaluation, you'll see that impacting on their cost, which very may also impact on their profitability.
Thank you, Ayodeji. Does Nigeria have the capacity, though, to localize equipment manufacturing, network licensing, these management services and other items that lead to this large import bill?
Yeah, I think we just need to look at the items. So when you look at management services, so is there, in terms of transfer of knowledge over a period, even if we say we don't have that expertise or there's still that knowledge gap, there needs to be like a plan so that there's a reduction in the use of expatriates. That is why when you look at management services, very significant. And we need to see how we want to localize over time. It's not going to be a short fix. It's going to be a long-term plan that will develop capacity to be able to manage a lot of these services. And in terms of software, it is also something that we can begin to look at what are their requirements and look inwards and get young Nigerians to begin to develop softwares. And yes, they will require a lot of support. They will require, there's a lot of time that will be needed. But if you can see the amount of FX utilization, if we can be able to reduce this, that would also reduce demand for FX. But beyond that, I don't think that where we feel we can come in, when you look at some of the usage within that space, also telephones, can we get companies to come into Nigeria, even if it's to start with assembling and begin to produce in Nigeria? So these are I know there are some things that is being done around that side, but we need to also increase that to reduce the demand for FX for that sector.
Thank you, Ayodeji. Professor Akpan Ekpo, who is the chairman of the Foundation of Economic Research and Training, says that the FX import bill for telcos negates the double-digit GDP growth that we've seen from the sector. What do you make of that?
I think for me, there are two different things here. So when we're looking at in terms of contribution is, I think, around 12%, and the growth has also been double digits. In terms of the trade, yes, when you look at the demand, so on a net basis, we're importing more than what we're exporting, so which is putting pressure on the CBN and is impacting on the naira. And any major devaluation or any major impact on the naira as a way of also feeding into cost, which will impact on growth. But I think the focus here is we just need to develop plans. What are those things that we can develop over time in Nigeria? Especially human capital. A lot of Nigerians travel abroad and they are doing well. So can we have plans in terms of transfer of knowledge over a particular period such that companies will not have a cap for foreign companies? Will there be a cap to the number of percentage of expatriate that they will use? And over time, how will they transfer that knowledge? These are some of the things that we may begin to look at, and that would also impact on our economic growth because we'll be receiving that income, and it will be spent within the country.
Thank you so much, Ayodeji. To central banks, a number of central banks in Sub-Saharan Africa and the decisions they're making as far as benchmark rates. How do you see things go? I think Ghana, South Africa this week, Nigeria next week. How do you see the decisions going for those central banks, Sub-Saharan central banks?
Yeah, I think there's something critical that will be common to the decision for all the African central banks is the resuscitation of the third wave of COVID-19. So I believe that a lot of the banks will not be too quick to tamper with their rate. They want to see how much of impact with this third wave would have. You can see Kenya, I think they're still in the lockdown, the partial lockdown. South Africa is trying to also reintroduce a permanent lockdown, which would impact on their growth. So I think what we would say is for most of the African central banks may want to maintain status quo, trying to study how much of impact, so that if there's a lot of impact, they may want to lower rates at the next meeting. So we really don't expect, we're not expecting any major tweak to interest rate environment. Focus will be on growth. And a lot of the central banks will be looking at what support can they provide to complement the efforts of the government. And looking at coming to Nigeria, for us, our MPR at 13.5%, with the slower pace of growth that we're seeing in inflation rates, that would also reduce the hawkish stance of the CBN. So what we would say is that CBN will focus more on the impact of the intervention funds and also the issue of FX. What can we do? We can see that, yes, there's been a movement at the official window. How can we sustain? How can that be sustained? What are the measures that can be taken to improve liquidity also of the FX, so that for other segments of the market, there can be a bit of convergence and there can be also confidence for foreign.
Fantastic stuff. Ayodeji Ebo, Head of Retail Investment at Chapel Hill Denham. Thank you so much for taking us through those headlines. We appreciate your insights.